Good morning. What a fun song. It's a serious song, but it's a fun song. Vicki and I have been all over the world lately. We just got back, a couple weeks back from Asia, where a lot of people have been wading in the water. And so we wanted to have an opportunity to use probably the first half of the sermon slot to tell you some things that are going on the other side of the world. And then we'll have a short message, of course, from the book of Psalms. And thank you for your support. Seems to me almost all of my teaching has been coming from the book of Psalms lately. So if you would, the lights will come down a bit up here, and I hope you can see the photos we've brought back, but especially the heart that we've brought back from the other side of the world from our recent Asian tour. Have to begin with a tiny bit of geography. Of course, we're right here. That's not hard. Asia is one whopping continent. Can you see it? I mean, it's just enormous. To fly there, you go through Japan and then Singapore, which was our target because this is where the International Leadership Conference was taking place. I'll never forget my first time in Singapore when I was in my early 20s, or the first when we planted a church there. I remember a few months after we planted it, Vicki and I went there from our home in London. It was so awesome to see 10 people baptized on one day. Now many thousands have become Christians through that ministry. If we zoom in on Asia, can you see that? This would be China up here. India is over there. Here's China, here's Indonesia. Singapore, unless you're sitting on the front row, you can't even see it because it's just a city-state. It's a tiny little dot right there. That's Singapore, and that was our target. A city of several million, a beautiful place to be, largely Chinese, though it's multi-ethnic, has a lot of history from World War II, but going way back and way forward. Build was the theme of the International Leadership Conference, actually began with the Steve Johnson musical, a musical where all the characters were Asians. Mary and Joseph were actually Indonesian. Jesus was Asian as well. And some people had a problem with that, but I didn't, because in the Bible, I know Jesus was Asian because Israel's part of Asia. But culturally, it was an amazing conference to be at. Thousands of people came to that musical, and the conference was really something. We even had a chance to celebrate our 30th anniversary in advance with friends, with a couple who took us out to dinner. Singapore is an amazing place, and even though it takes about 30 hours to get to, I hope you can drop by someday. Singapore, one of the most impressive experiments in modern politics, and a really great place to visit, especially mid-80s and 99% humidity. But we love that place, and that's what we wanted to talk about first. Vicki.
No, Doug said 30 years ago we lived in London, and perhaps the London congregation was our home base, and today North River, you really provide a home base for us to be able to go and travel to all different parts of the world. And at that time we were leading the campus ministry. It's hard to believe, but that was 30 years ago. And so it was a very impressionable time from us, from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, because we were very involved in helping start congregations and strengthening churches in Asia, as Doug pointed out. I think London is an incredibly significant city. Obviously, that's where I'm from, and that's not why I think it's significant, but there are 46 universities in London. There are over 100,000 international students that study in London. The University of London has over 132,000 students currently. And basically people that were all, or countries that were all connected with what was the former British Commonwealth. Countries like India, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Africa, places in Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria. This Commonwealth of nations would send their brightest. The governments would then send their students often to London for their education. And we were privileged to study the Bible and to help a lot of these people become Christians. And it was so encouraging to be able to go to Singapore and reconnect with people that we haven't seen, some of them for 20 years, some almost 30 years since we were able to study the Bible with them. And so it was a tremendous time of encouragement just to see what God had been doing in a totally opposite part of the world. It was a 12-hour time difference. We land there and you just feel completely upside down. You don't really know what's going on. But to be able to go and see people who have become so dear to us. But it was a long time ago. But it was very, very encouraging. And I think sometimes, if you've been around a long time like I have, we wonder about the things when we saved up money and we gave it to missions, or we sold something, and we saw these churches go out, and you think, what's really happening? What's going on? Sometimes it can become wearisome. But honestly, going to Singapore to see what's being built out there in Asia was an incredible encouragement. And it reminded me that I've been very privileged, like the Apostle Paul, to go back and visit places that we were involved with and to see the faith, to see how they've imitated. They've put the gospel into practice, and they've built very solidly. And we were able to go and just be a part of this huge conference. And I think, you know, in the early 80s and 90s, the scriptures had a profound impact on us, not just in missions, but obviously in becoming aware of the poverty and the plight of orphans. And for us in the middle of the 90s, we were able to adopt, she's now a 20-year-old who's off at college, our youngest daughter, Lily, from China. And so we may not look very Asian, but there's a lot more Asian in us than that's really there. And so going back and reconnecting with families and connections, and we just wanted to bring you greetings from them because truly it was a joy to be out there.
Actually, I promised I'd give you greetings from Wilmington. It's a thing I do. 2 weeks ago, I was preaching in LA. They gave their greetings to Wilmington, North Carolina. Last week, I told Wilmington, if you want, I'll say hello to Atlanta. And then if you want, I'll say hello to Halifax, Nova Scotia next Sunday. Just nod your head if you're, okay, I'll give the greetings to the Canadians, and they'll play it forward to the Italians, and that'll be great. Okay, so after Singapore, we went to nearby Indonesia. And one of the great things this year is, more than most years, I've been able to go with Vicki. A lot of that is because of your support to do it, and donations as well. But to be able to teach together internationally has really helped. You've probably heard of Jakarta, by far the largest city in the largest Muslim nation in the world. You may not have heard of Surabaya. Then that's exactly why we wanted to go there. Because when we started the church in Singapore, 88, in Indonesia, about 2 years later, our Indonesian ministry is very small. Now it's dozens of congregations, so much that when they had their leadership conference, it really wasn't wise to all come to Jakarta. They went to different parts of the country because it's huge. It's like trying to put all the United States in one place, like Phoenix. I mean, it's better to break it up. So we were in the part that's over here, that part of Indonesia, as you get towards Irian Jaya, Papua New Guinea, that side. So we went to Surabaya, which is similar to Atlanta in size. Although the conference was only about 500, it was attended by people from all over, including Denpasar, which is the next place we went. Now you can guess where we did our teaching from. It was from the Psalms, because if I didn't mention that, we love the Psalms. We've been doing a lot. And after there, we flew over to Denpasar, which is the part of Indonesia that's not quite as Muslim. In fact, there are a lot of Hindus and Buddhists. And it's amazing. You go to church and people want to meet you and they say, hello, I'm from Hindu background. This is my wife. She was Muslim. Hi, I'm from Buddhist background. My wife here, she was Hindu. I'm from Muslim background, but I married Hindu here. Most everyone there is coming from a background that's Hindu, Buddhist, or Muslim. And by the way, that is more than half of the world. And so that picture is what most of the world is like, which is not the same as Fulton County, nothing against it. But these are Hindu gods. They have, of course, the dwarf elephant on the island of Indonesia, and there's Vicki with one of them. So that was an absolute blast. And before I share finally about Myanmar, about Burma, Vicki's going to tell you a little bit more about what we felt when we were in Indonesia.
Going to Surabaya was a huge treat. What they did is they replicated the conference, the leadership conference from Singapore, and then they took it to like regional conferences, and they had about 12 other conferences going on around Indonesia because people could not afford to go to Singapore. And so we were able to go and be a part of those extra conferences, and it was really a treat. I think going to Surabaya, which is the second largest city, seeing the enthusiasm, and they were so excited because they were holding and hosting their own conference. They didn't have to go to the big city of Jakarta, And they had their women's program, and I think it was the first time they'd had a women's program. And I was very privileged to speak and shared a little bit about how Mary built relationships during her lifetime, and the need for us as women to constantly be making new relationships, to be learning, to grow, and to really be a support to one another as we go through the trials of life. We were able, I think, just to the warmth. The Christians there, they are poor compared to us, but they're so happy and they're so content and they're so giving that it strikes you to the core of your soul, because I have so much more than they do. But it really stuck out to me that it is what the joy, the fruit of the Spirit, real joy comes from, because their joy and their happiness, it comes from their relationship from God, not from their material things. Another thing that stood out too is how much, even though they are poor, they help the poor. Not just giving money, but really with their time. And they put together some incredible programs to help people become better in English or better in computer skills so they can get better jobs. And their programs have been so effective. They've been recognized a lot of times by the government as well. But to see what they're doing to help each other, that joy that comes from their heart, from their relationship with God. It was a true, what I'm going to say, it's more than an experience. It's just like, it's an incredible bond that you're able to build with people as you see you have the same foundation. Many of those people at Surabaya came from Denpasar, which was the last place we showed you with all the Hindu gods. It was a 12-hour drive, and so Sunday after church, they left to drive home and then went to work on Monday. Many of them with their children, they just loaded up these old minivans with as many food and kids as they could, and they drove back. And so we were very happy that on the Wednesday evening, we were able to go and repeat the lesson that they had missed the Sunday afternoon. And in Denpasar, it's amazing because you see people, young women in the mornings, walking the streets, maybe for a mile, with a tray, with a plate of food, because they're going to worship and they're going to make a sacrifice to their idol, to their God, to a piece of wood or a piece of stone. And they're incredibly sincere. And yet I look to them and you're thinking, why would they do that? And they realize it's because they don't know the God that we know. But then I ask myself that question, what do I do? That maybe God looks down and says, Vicki, why are you doing that? Day after day, you're taking something, but you're not really putting me first. And, and I realize it's easy to be sincere, but sincerity is not enough. And so in Denpasar, there's some incredibly sincere people, but they're from completely different religious background. But they're sincerely wrong. And I think just seeing the hearts of the Christians there wanting to reach out, wanting to overcome the obstacles that are there, the poverty, but to help bring people into the fellowship. And as Doug said, it's just amazing to meet someone who's a Hindu with a Muslim wife, and they're so proud that they've really converted to Christ. They didn't just change churches. They've really given their whole heart, and it's very moving to be able to be a part of that. They wanted to have so many pictures taken. I mean, Doug and I are literally head and shoulders taller than them, and we stick out. We're enormous compared to all of them. But they were just so excited, and we were able to bring greetings from the churches here. Yeah, even next to the elephant, I'm a large person. Anyway, we were able to bring those greetings from here and just say, that we do remember them in our prayers from this side of the world.
The enthusiasm of those brothers and sisters, your sister congregation in Denpasar, was amazing. I've been of all the places I've spoken, this is first place for hugs, for warmth, for greetings, for photograph, for please, another photo, bro, another photo, another photo, another photo. It's an hour of fellowship after just giving hugs and greeting. And it's not because they're overflowing with confidence. It's not because of ego. It's because they're appreciative. They're warm. And maybe one day you can visit Denpasar. You want to say anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to share
Okay.
that. I mean, I think for me, I think of the verse in Galatians 6:9 that talks about not growing weary in doing good or feeling like giving up at times. Sometimes as parents, we relate to that verse and we wonder what's going on. Maybe it can be with helping the poor or missions because the job seems so enormous. But really, this trip was able to bring a lot of encouragement to me to see what God has done through efforts 30 years ago, things that we did or that we gave up many years ago. And I think I want you to be encouraged too, because I know so many people here, you've done the same things. You've given up things, you've sacrificed, you've sold things, and yet the missions are going very well out in Asia. And just continue to keep them in your prayers, because it is a tough place to live, and yet the joy that they have and their enthusiasm and how they're building their walk with God is truly a joy, and it was honestly an honor to be out there and to be with them.
Yes, it is. And through that Singapore plant, I don't know how many thousands have been baptized, probably 6,000 or 7,000. I mean, just in Indonesia, you're dealing with thousands and thousands. Vicki finally came back. She had been away from Atlanta for 3 weeks. I stayed on for just another 4 days and went to Myanmar, which that's the former Burma. They changed names. They have a new government. You may know Myanmar because of their famous Nobel Prize winner, the one who was under house arrest, and finally she was able to receive the Nobel Prize like 20 years later. They have a new government. The military has stepped back a lot, and there's a freedom and a sense of hope in Myanmar, which is really amazing. Yangon is the principal city, not the capital, but it is by far the largest city, and this is a Buddhist nation. I had a chance to visit a pagoda which dates back to the time of the Buddha, which means more than 2,500 years old. I mean, the Buddha lives around the time that the Israelites were carried into Babylon. I mean, this is a long time ago, and it was not only interesting for me as a student of Buddhism, but just to look at human nature, the kinds of sacrifices. For example, they think that if you don't give offerings to a tiger or a crocodile, and these are offerings, as you can see, of fruit and meat and bottled water. If you don't give that, the evil spirit inside the crocodile or the tiger will get you. And this is the kind of thing that people truly believe. When they meet Jesus, they are set free from those fears, the kinds of fears we read about in Colossians 2 or Hebrews 2. And we need to be set free, because that's really no way to live. There I am. That's David, his English name. That's the main leader there in Yangon. And that's me behind him. And you can see the pagoda right there. His family and the brothers. Several of the brothers and sisters speak English a little bit, and that is fantastic. But in most countries where I preach and teach, I need a translator. I'm not going to speak Burmese, but I'll tell you, to visit with them is so encouraging. So it's right up there. After Burma, back to Singapore, and then finally the long trip, 40 hours back to the United States. Kind of a summary: Singapore, delegates meetings, leadership conference; Indonesia, these two cities, and then on to Yangon, and we observed joy. We saw expression of gratitude, and we felt that deeply, and truly a sense of contentment that I think can say something to us, and it's a reality check for us, something that should make a difference in our lives as well. And so we're going to talk now from one particular psalm. All the psalms are set to music. I think you know that. We have no idea what the tune is, but this is one of the psalms that they sang when they were walking up to Jerusalem, that is, on pilgrimage. So I would like to close out the sermon slot today with some reflections on Psalm 131, and I hope this will be meaningful to you. Each psalm, of course, has a theme. 131 seems to be talking about contentment. 132 is about God's house. Not just the building, but the dynasty. Psalm 133, unity, and so forth. And there's a lot to the Psalms. They come to life with just a tiny bit of background. We read, "My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. I have calmed and quieted myself like a weaned child on its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content." Have you noticed that psalm before? If you've read through the Psalms, I'm sure you have. What does it mean? Before we know how it applies to us, we need to ask what it actually means. At first, he says, I don't concern myself with great matters. Almost sounds like that's not my responsibility. Maybe he's lackadaisical. And you read the thing about the child, things too wonderful for me, you might think he's anti-intellectual. Like, I don't really bother with learning. It's just me and the Bible. I don't need anything else. I don't need to push myself or expand my horizons. But that's not what he's talking about. In fact, you've got to let the psalm interpret the psalm. See, in verse 1, this concern with great matters has to do with being haughty. This is that self-focus. This is the arrogance. Here, the contrast is being like a child. So we're not talking about what you know. We're not talking about whether you're educated or not, or whether you push yourself. We're talking about an attitude, a very wrong attitude, and then a very right attitude. Think about this. Of course, Ecclesiastes says of making many books, there's no end. And I know if you're distracted like I am, you're interested in everything, you can get sucked in. And you kind of go with the stampede. I hear there's a new current or a trend or scientific study, and I want to know, and I want to get the article. And in a way, I can be distracted by God. And why is that? Just to be perceived as with it or current with the times? I know you all know that I'm extremely with it, not just in my dress, but in every other way. But I think maybe in some sense, this is what he's talking about. Things too marvelous for me. There's a kind of a distraction from what it's all about, which is about faith in God here. Not trying to be important. This illusion of control that the child doesn't have, but we can have. We want to be the biggest and the best. We want to rise to the top of our profession. Now, if God promotes you up like Daniel and Joseph because of your integrity, amen. But if you want to rise to the top, like the cream rising to the top, why is that? Why do we want to be that way? Is it because of Christ? Or is it because perhaps we're haughty and we're focusing on the wrong things? I feel a little bit challenged by that. I have calmed and quieted myself like a weaned child on its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. When I first read this, I think of anxiety. In fact, I would say until I was preparing for this sermon, I always read the psalm that way. That, you're overheating, you're getting flustered, you need to calm down, Douglas, don't fret, which may be a theme in Psalm 37, but I don't think anymore that that's what this psalm is talking about. Let's let the psalm interpret itself. See, we want to jump and say, well, I feel this, or it means this to me. What is it actually saying? Well, in some sense, the opposite of that haughty spirit is this childlike spirit. Think of Matthew 18, where Jesus says we need to have faith like a child. He's not talking about anxiety here. He's talking about an openness to God. He's talking about faith. We can read this, I think, incorrectly too, and I've done that, the weaned child. So we think, oh, the weaned child, right. So this is Madonna and child. The weaned child sitting in its mother's arm, drinking the milk of life, and, she's suckling the baby. But that's actually the opposite of what weaned is. I mean, weaned means you don't drink from your mother anymore. And normally in this, think of when Hannah presented Samuel to the temple, when Hannah brought her son to the temple, Eli, in the beginning of 1 Samuel. I mean, he's walking and talking. They would typically wean them at age 3. So this is not a baby. Hopefully this does not wear diapers anymore. This is a weaned child. It's a child that talks. It's a child that has learned from experience that it doesn't really pay to fight its parents. It's better just to trust. And it's carried. Something kind of bugged me. This idea of the weaned child being with its mother. I thought, is that even right? Something was wrong. I checked the different English translations. I checked the Hebrew. The Hebrew version, the original, says that the child is on its mother. I thought, well, how did the Jews understand that when they translated it themselves before the time of Christ into Greek? They translated on the mother, not with the mother. I don't know where these guys get this. It says on the mother. The mother is carrying the child. Not only that, it's a psalm of ascents. The psalm is sung as people are walking up to the temple. The mother is carrying the child. It's on the mother. It could insist on walking itself up, but you know how kids are when they're toddler, post-toddler. They say, carry me. They're thinking it's too far, carry me. This child knows that its parent is superior in strength, in knowledge, and it's really a fool's errand to walk up yourself when your mother could carry you. It's on the mother. This child is not easily ruffled. Maybe that's true, but I think it's more that the child is not taking charge. It's, again, that illusion of control. And that speaks to me, and perhaps that speaks to you, whatever your age is. But we're not quite finished because there's one more verse. And that is this, and I don't know if that verse is part of the original psalm. Maybe it was added hundreds of years later. Because in the beginning of the psalm, that sounds like something for your daily devotion with God, right? Look, let me get my heart in the right position, or maybe a communion meditation. But something has been added here that now addresses all of God's people. So the distraction or the illusion of control is not just a threat for an individual sister or brother. It's something collective. It's something for God's people. And that's why we read Israel. And that's the tribes of Israel. It's not one person named Israel. This is everyone. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. This will be an ongoing need for the people of God. How could we miss this? Sometimes we put our hope in the system. We put our hope in leadership. Or as Jeremiah's servant Baruch was warned, Jeremiah chapter 45, we seek great things for ourselves. We see a chance to be promoted from within God's people, Jeremiah 45. That's not what we should seek. We shouldn't just presume to be overseers or teachers, 1 Timothy 3, James 3. Put your hope in the Lord, not in man, and certainly not in yourself. Instead of control, we need to be content, to surrender to God. That's the beauty today. Two women surrendered control, made Jesus Lord. This week, several brothers in the campus ministry here are brothers because they surrendered control. And I read the bio in the bulletin. These are not thick, these guys. Look what they study. Look where they study. But they're saying someone is smarter than me, and no longer will I insist on doing it myself. Here, I give up. Pick me up, Lord. Hold me in your arms. I will be content. I've learned enough in life to know that you're going to take care of me. You fed me all these years. You've led me thus far. And I will trust you, and that's a great message for anyone considering becoming a Christian or considering stopping being a Christian. Because what's it going to be like with you in control again? I mean, my experience, when I say, okay, God, I got it now, let me be in control, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. Like the dream I had last night. I should have been driving, and I was, and my car went out of control, and I was flying through the air. It was an incredible crash dream in a car, but that's kind of like that. You know, we want to do it when we shouldn't be doing it, and we get out of control. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you don't, you will in 3 weeks, I promise. Surrender to God. Surrender control. He's smarter than you. He's stronger than you. He will carry us all the way on our pilgrimage. So let's read this verse, this psalm one last time. And this has been adapted, okay? I adapted it. You ready? God, I'm not trying to rule the roost. I don't want to be king of the mountain. I haven't meddled where I have no business or fantasized grandiose plans. I've kept my feet on the ground. I've cultivated a quiet heart. Like a toddler content in its mother's arms, my soul is a child content. Wait, Israel, for God. Wait with hope. Hope now, hope always. It's a message not only for us individually, but even more for us as a group. And so I ask, give up control, be content, and let's go up to Jerusalem together.